Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jace, and welcome to another exciting episode of the ELAV8 podcast. Today, Sam and I are all over the place discussing everything from taxation to the political system, as well as we touch on how is the film and entertainment industry actually doing here in California.
Investors are incentivized, so you're basically incentivized to be a parasite in other companies that you don't work at, versus the people that work at that company who receive very little of the profits. All the profits go to the investors who pay 20% on capital gains, whereas if you work at a company, you have over 40% of your salary taken away in taxes. Plus, the employer is paying a whole bunch of fees right off the top to pay that salary. So when you think about the absurdity of all of this, it's kind of there.
What's up, guys, and welcome to another exciting, maybe not as exciting, maybe mediocre episode of the ELAV8 podcast. Because I'm not gonna lie, Sam and I just wanted to hang out this week, and we said, "Yo, let's just do it live. Let's do it live." What's up, man?
What's up? Yeah, I'm actually gonna say this is gonna be our best episode ever, and then we're gonna see. You might say mediocre. I'm gonna say we're gonna do a freeform jazz odyssey here. And make magic, Jace. So that's my perspective. And I was thinking about it in the 4 seconds that I had to think about what we should talk about today. And literally, what if we headline this one as solving the world's problems? Right now, we talk a lot about the world's problems, but what if we just decided to solve some today, or pretended that we could?
Oh man, if we can do that, that would be incredible. And I know you have no interest in this, but we should run for office if we do that, because maybe we could actually achieve something.
That is the fastest way to not solve problems, is to be in office somewhere.
Okay.
I think. But maybe let's actually talk about that. Why don't we start there? Let's solve, or first, can we acknowledge that there might be a political problem in our country?
I think there's a major political problem within our country.
How would you define our political problem?
Our political problem is very, very simple if you really think about it. We're driving people into a conciliation amongst niches, right? So like we have the left versus the right. There's no like form of collectivism within the United States anymore, and it's actually pretty sad.
Yes, I find it astonishing that we are being forced to choose between the two choices. Like, these are the only two possible people our country could decide that we could possibly run for president. And what's even worse is you're watching people like somehow being forced to have this cognitive dissonance of defending either of these choices as if they are healthy or positive, because they feel compelled that they have to.
Yeah, but this goes back to what I said just like not even 30, 40 seconds ago, is this is exactly why people like you and I should run, right? You can't have it both ways, Sam. Like people have to step up, but they realize exactly what you're saying is like, why would I ever do that to myself? I'm not masochistic enough to want to participate in this charade and just have that much self-hatred for myself.
Well, the other thing too, I'd say though, is like, I think I'd be more comfortable running for local government than I would be national government, because the amount of bureaucracy that you are forced. Like, have you ever worked at a big company, Jace?
Yes and no. Yes, because like technically I did, but they let me do whatever I want. Everywhere I've ever gone, people just let me do whatever I want.
Well, I think that stops the second you get into national government in this country.
Okay.
But I do think let's talk about solutions, right? So let's solve the two-party system right now, if we can. How do you solve the two-party system, Jace, if you're you?
I mean, the first step in the right direction would be ranked choice voting, right? Because ranked choice voting actually gives a third party a chance, right? Where, if it's just either or, there is no chance. So we would have to change how we vote in general.
Well, I think we might even have to start with the idea of agreeing or finding a way to agree that right now you have both on the right and the left. Everybody thinks every election is rigged, no matter who's running in it. There's no approved system for voting that anyone would trust. They say if it's a written ballot, then those can be faked. If it's electronic, then I think it can be hacked. So no matter what, there's a built-in excuse or AI is just going to run whatever election it is. It's just bots voting. So like how would you even get anyone to agree on a reality where there would be a not rigged election?
So this is where, my tech bro mine hat comes on, right? And I just start talking about, the blockchain in general. But you can still technically have a
Oh,
non
is
what?
this a citizen based blockchain that is carved out according to maybe your social security number that gives you a vote?
Well, even then, like if you want to get dark for a second, a government could create fake identities if they wanted, because a social security number isn't a carbon-based life form, right? It's a ID, right? And IDs credentials can be faked. In a weird way, you could actually, I'm not saying it would be easy to do, but you could hack in to the Social Security office or
But
whatever
what if
office runs that.
that ledger was a public ledger? Maybe not around how you voted, but it was a public ledger that had public oversight,
Well, once again,
similar to
you
Bitcoin.
okay, so the reason why Bitcoin exists and the reason why it works is because the ledger doesn't have to have an audit based around identity, right? So let me just back up real quick. This is such a deep conversation, and hey, man, you kicked it off, so let's go for
Let's
it.
go.
Yeah. So when it comes to voting, right? You have to have what's called a Sybil resistant system, meaning that I can't vote proxy for 5 other people. I can't create 5 fake identities and then use those 5 fake identities for any form of governance. And the way that you combat Sybil resistant, or you promote Sybil resistance, not combat, sorry, is that you have to have a vote that's backed by carbon unique, right? Meaning that I am a unique piece of carbon. All right, I'm human. I'm not AI, and that carbon-based unique individual only gets 1 vote. So you would have to have not only a blockchain system that is, like you said, a public ledger, but you would have to have the ability to audit it and assign each vote to one human unique identity.
Or what if it was just simply based on you get a vote if you filed a tax return the prior year?
But see, this is that you're right. That is a layer to it. But this is like when we get dark, right? And I want to be very specific on this. What you're saying is 100%, 1000%. You can do that. You can do that today. But if I'm a dark, nation state, what I could do is I could create fake tax returns. Like that's not hard to do. You could spin up an AI that says, "Hey, I want you to create 50,000 tax returns," and there would be nothing to prove that those people or non-people humans didn't exist.
Okay, well then let's unpack that. There might be, which is then you have to have a on the local ledger a validated system by humans at the local ledger validating these returns, right? So these are elected public officials who then do this, blockchain accountability experts or witnesses or whatever, and you do this, across regions. I'm just throwing out ideas here. I'm countering your things because they would have to have human accredited accountability by publicly elected people to account for blockchain transparency.
I mean, that could work, but then you get into scalability, right? It's like, can you scale that?
Are you kidding? Of course you can. So you'd be able to scale that for the amount of waste that goes into stupid public programs. You could just provide jobs. I would say this would be a very good job, which is public. These are basically elections officers or polling officers, right? Who are hired specifically. The same way you might have a court system where people bailiffs, right? You have election accountability experts who are leveraging the blockchain and paid governmental resources essentially to just have accountability.
So once again, it can work. You're not going to hear me say it can't work. The only caveat to what you're saying that I could actually see being a problem, let's say you onboard that person, all right? So Sam, I've onboarded you. This is our interview, right? Sam, please hold up 2 fingers on your left side. Please, and you hold up your 2 fingers on your left side. You're a human being. This is great. I've now assigned you your identity. You're a unique person. Good to go, right? Now, what's stopping someone from logging into your account and voting for you on your behalf?
Well, we did have somebody on the podcast a few weeks back
Uh-huh.
who had a certain identity system for something like this, where it was tied uniquely to that person.
You beat me to it. That's exactly what I was gonna say. You need a carbon-based validation check on every signature. So there's a thing. There's a saying I've created and I've coined, and no one's taken arms with it yet. But I promise you one day it's come up big, and you're like, man, Jace came up with it. And it's identity can be created or transferred. All right. But identity, so I'm gonna start over because I just butchered that. Identity can neither be created nor transferred. It can only sign transactions.
And so my simple question would be, if every identity, if we take just the Bitcoin model, right, which is a fairly transparent, open blockchain, why can't Bitcoin be hacked, Jace? Or why hasn't it been hacked? There's so much money in hacking it.
Well, I mean, it can be hacked. First of all, it's just not profitable. So that's a common misconception is like people think that
So why
Bitcoin
isn't
can't
it
be hacked.
profitable?
Well, this is why the proof of work system is so beautiful, right? So a lot of people and a lot of environmentalists and politicians in Wall Street and in Washington, they always try to say that Bitcoin's electricity usage it makes it detrimental to the environment and makes it detrimental to like its scalability. And reality, it's a beautiful thing, right? And the reason why it's a beautiful thing is it costs money to maintain the ledger and it costs money to sign transactions. Okay, and to answer your question, to bring it full circle, let's say a nation state was to attack Bitcoin and try to create a double spend, right? Meaning that they have enough nodes, enough people signing to say no, this is the actual transaction that happened, and to roll back the chain, etc. What would happen is all the good nodes on the network that are like watching what's happening, they'd be like, that's clearly not right because our ledger says one thing. Hey, ledger over here. Yeah. So what they would do is they would fork the chain and roll it back to the transaction history that we know is the right ledger. And because of that, they would spend, I mean, literally probably billions of dollars to try to facilitate a hack that would quickly be nullified, and then that IP address or any IP address that was near that would just be kicked off the whole entire validation network.
So you're proving my point then, right? So if we took the Bitcoin model and applied that to elections, uh, even if you hacked an election, you'd be able to fork it back to its correct way.
Only if there's an identity system behind it. Only if.
Maybe, well, there's an identity system. So if you think about that, if there's an identity system that hey, look, if we're all going to participate in this, right? So let's actually talk through what that looks like. So if you're choosing to do your electronic tax returns authentically, you're buying into the system. So, okay, you bought into the system. Well, then elections are part of that system. And then you need fair elections, right? So if you're doing all of this, then what you should be able to do then is be able to check the ledger to make sure that your vote was counted correctly on the transparent ledger, where you could authentically confirm that with your identity. So you could file it, and then there might be a period after the election happens where you could fork it back to, affirm your vote in the real world. And this would essentially allow humans who have that vote to make sure their vote was counted correctly on the public blockchain.
Yeah, to make a small addendum to what you're saying is that I would actually give people bonus credits, whatever credits towards, to validate their friends' transactions as well. Yeah. Right. So people that were within, let's say, 3 hops of your identity, almost like what LinkedIn does, is like, this is a second connection. This is a third connection, whatever it is that you could, validate, other people's votes. Or if you were to, essentially, because I know that some people are very private with their vote, right? So it's almost like you could opt in to that audibility, right? So
but also your vote could be potentially, all you would need to do is validate the system and have someone validate the validation. The vote would not have to be shared.
Yeah, fair enough. It's just we get in a weird territory when there isn't audibility against unknowns, right? Because the whole thing that happened in the last election.
So let's ask this though. Sorry to interrupt, but actually a thought just occurred to me. And like, why would you want your vote to not be transparent?
I mean, okay. I can give you a pretty like solidified answer to this, and it all falls back to the 2016 election, right? I have friends that voted for Donald Trump, right? I don't judge them, right? I'm just giving you a contextualization, all right? But they never were vocal about their vote for Donald Trump, right? And they were called and they dubbed themselves the silent majority, right? And he was an incredibly polarizing figure at that time. He still is, but because he was so polarizing, they didn't feel comfortable broadcasting their vote. The same thing is happening in this new election, the 2024 election that's coming up. And it's actually kind of interesting because that fear of being open about being a conservative back in 2016, 2020 is kind of actually evaporating. There's a major shift happening right now in politics where conservatism, and it's driven by the issues that we see with inflation and all those other things, are actually becoming more prominent. But that's my answer, is that the silent majority movement in the 2016, like that was very much people didn't feel comfortable sharing their political
I would
POV.
simply say we make senators make their votes public, right? Their votes are on the public record.
Mhm.
So, as citizens, wouldn't we want to live in a country where all citizens should be accountable for their votes?
Maybe. I don't know. I think it's more so we should
I don't know that I don't need
destigmatize.
to be right. I'm just it's an I part of me is also like fuck that. I think that's a horrible idea, but I want someone to tell me why.
Yeah, I think what needs to happen is an education around voting in general, and we need to destigmatize the belief that, I mean, it actually, I'm sorry, I'm going back to what you said, the two-party system. That's the problem. That's the root of the problem. If you solve the two-party system, and we, instead of have this divergence amongst political parties, and we start becoming more unified as a people within the United States, you really wouldn't have to worry about that, right? It wouldn't be, oh, I'm voting for the left or I'm voting for the right. You're a demon for voting for whatever, is not my
Well, all
political
right. Well,
system.
then let's get to the root problem then. How do we disrupt the two-party system?
I mean, my personal belief is it starts with voting in general. Is that we need ranked choice voting, because if you have ranked choice voting,
How does
then
that work,
it
by the
would,
way? I'm not actually familiar. So what is ranked choice voting?
well, basically is like you put like, this is my limited understanding of it. Instead of just putting one candidate, you put, this is my first candidate that I want, this is my second candidate, this is like my third candidate, right? And
Here,
based
so
on,
like you get points basically. Yeah.
exactly. And so it it just allows for more diversity on the ballot, and it isn't so polarizing, right?
Also, the absurdity of having you won 50% of the vote in a state, but but then you're getting all the electoral votes for that state is not representing the will of the people here.
Yeah, I mean, the electoral college is very interesting. I mean, I'm not educated enough on how it works to give like my perspective on it, but I've always found it really fascinating that the popular vote wasn't what drove, a country in a direction. But you know what? I take that back. Actually, I do have a perspective on this. I'm thinking about this in real time. Is that if it were the popular vote, all right, I'm gonna go back and forth on it. Is that cities, right? Major concentration of cities, they have like the largest populations, right? Where in rural America, like the farmlands, which take up more space across the United States, um, they don't have a dense population, and therefore they don't believe it's more representative because cities are controlling the vote, if that makes sense.
Well, I actually really agree with that too, because having you're going to have very like-minded people who share the same interest in a city, right? So Los Angeles, New York, all these big places, they're going to have their needs are going to come before a lot of places in more remote areas, and simply because there's more of those people concentrated. Where when you think about what's probably healthy for a country, you need those people in rural areas rights respected because they live in places, we might call it flyover country, but it doesn't mean that country's unimportant.
I was literally just thinking that inside my head as flyover country. That phrase was in my head while you were speaking. And it's absolutely right, man. It's like, I don't know, it's the forgotten, right? And that's what's really come to the forefront of American political psychology driven in 2016 was the forgotten, right? And I'm not supporting either party. It's just I'm trying to distill what that moment in time was as they felt forgotten. And that's what's really bubbling up right now.
Well, Trump
How
was the best con man available to them, right? He just said the right things, which is they were like, well, at the very least, he's lying to us in the right way. At least he's acknowledging our grievances. So that's better than the other team.
So, there was one thing he said during the Hillary debates that actually like got me to like listen for a moment. Cause I mean, you know me very well. I'm very open-minded. We talk about it all the time. I look at left politics, I look at right politics. But one thing Donald J. Trump said in the 2016 elections that got me, and I think what actually probably won him the election was they were talking about taxes, right? And Dave Chappelle surfaced this in his SNL monologue, which is like, Donald, do you pay your taxes? And he goes, no. And like everybody's like, he doesn't pay his taxes. And he goes, that makes me smart. And everybody leaned in for a second, right? You remember this?
Yeah, that's real.
And, yeah. And then he goes, he looked over at Hillary. He goes, Hillary, will you change the tax code to prevent people like me, right, from exploiting it? And he goes, you won't. Because if you do that, then you'll stop getting donors, right? Yep. I'm the best person to elect in the situation because I did do these things and I'm going to stop it, right?
And of course he didn't.
Well, in a weird way, he did do some things. It did help the rich, right? But there was a moment in time where people were like, wow, this person admitted to being like terrible, but like he knows exactly what's happening. And the way he framed it to Hillary, she didn't have anything to say back to it because in that moment he was right. He was so right. It's like she can't do that. She can't stop and plug those tax codes.
No, the system by design is weighted towards. I mean, okay, this is why I love this podcast because we can go from solving political problems to then delving into the idea of if you pay payroll on your salary, you're a chump, and here's why. So the reason that they haven't gotten rid of S corps is because everybody in Congress has an S corp, and otherwise they make no sense to do this. You're far more incentivized to run your life as a corporation. And then payroll yourself accordingly, and do all of this as a loan out company, which is why California is trying to get rid of loan out companies, which, by the way, is going to demolish the film industry. There's a whole list of things that happen here. But the absurdity of payroll taxes and removing a massive amount of your salary out of your taxes when you get to file annually, not only that, but when that's taken away, they also charge your employer a ton of money to then pay payroll on that salary versus getting a lump sum that comes into your loan out company, applying all of the various expenses against that lump sum in your company. And there's a million ways to get around the tax system in our country due to all of the loopholes, and then payrolling yourself whatever you want as your savings to be in your bank account that comes out tax-free at the end after all of your expenses. This is why you're a chump in this country if you are just on salary getting payrolled.
Well, I'm a chump at the moment, but you've been trying to tell me not to be a chump for a while. I'm actually thinking about becoming an S corp, by the way, based off our conversation. So I do appreciate that.
No, but like, just think about it. I mean, this is the way most people in society live at a higher level. And the reason for this is taxes. And unfortunately, we live in an economy where you're not incentivized to pay taxes because most business owners or most or even people owning stocks, right? If you look at the capital gains on stocks, and then you look at the amount of taxes taken out of the average person's paycheck, which is in some cases over 40%. But you're going to pay 20% capital gains on stocks. And we have mostly an investor economy where, investors are incentivized. So you're basically incentivized to be a parasite in other companies that you don't work at versus the people that work at that company who receive very little of the profits. All the profits go to the investors who pay 20% on capital gains. Whereas if you work at a company, you have over 40% of your salary taken away in taxes. Plus, the employer is paying a whole bunch of fees right off the top to pay that salary. So when you think about the absurdity of all of this, it's kind of there.
I mean, don't get me started on some of the things that we could spend a whole podcast just on taxes and how broken it is. I mean, one thing.
So let's fix taxes. We didn't fix the political system, but our ADD kicked in, and now we're fixing taxes.
So the first thing I would fix, right? Like this is a solution. Is I think property taxes, once you've paid off the property, your primary residence shouldn't exist. I think property taxes are the biggest scam on the face of the earth. Is like because you never can truly own your property.
Well, you don't. I mean, I think that's about it. So think about this, right? So I saw this thing where it's like, okay, so if you're payrolled, you're going to pay payroll taxes, right? Of like 40% or whatever it is. So your salary gets taxed. Then every purchase you make gets taxed 7 or 8% on the sales tax side, right? And then you've got property taxes, you've got all of these other, all of these other taxes that come into municipalities. So when you think about how in every and then estate taxes. So when you die, they take more. So gradually, if you look at, and then 3% every time you use a credit card fee. So every time, so they take 3% off the top of every transaction right out of the gate, 40% out of your paycheck, then 7 or 8% on every transaction you make on sales side. And then you've got to pay property taxes on a house that you bought, and on down the line, right down to then when you die, they're going to take however much money they take out of that. And if you look at, it's like one of those, cascading coin games that you might see in like the boardwalk where like you put in a corner, then that pushes and then push, and then you've got all this money just sitting on the ledges. That's kind of how I view this.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts? Because I know you saw it and you're still plugged into the California political system. What's your thoughts on the mileage tax that's being proposed here in California, that we're going to be taxed for every single mile we drive? Have you seen that?
I mean, the carbon tax, right? So when you think
it's not the carbon tax.
I mean, but they want a carbon tax too. Like, this is absurd. Like, it's absurd. And the thing is, the problem is, the economy of California is so bankrupt and so broke and so corrupt that you have people just searching for new ways to like rob people of funding because what they're doing is so fundamentally unsustainable. Like you have people in charge of the homeless problem who spend $700,000 to build a single family residence of taxpayer money, who are trying to solve the homeless problem one $700,000 residence at a time. That's where your taxes are going, is to incompetent people who then run out of money. And I'm like, how do we get more money? Well, mileage tax. Let's do a mileage tax. That sounds good. Approved, and it's destroying the economy there, where anybody with any sort of common sense, they're going to get rid of loan out corporations, and they're completely demolishing the film industry, which largely runs on loan out corporations because they're all gig workers. They did the same thing with AB5, which is payroll taxes, that was there to stop Uber and Lyft from not paying out payroll. You know what happened there, California? You instituted AB5 on the film industry, which fundamentally runs on the gig economy, and Uber and Lyft lobbied their way out of the whole rule that was created to stop them in the first place. This is how corrupt it all is, Jace.
Wow. What can we talk about that's positive? We want to solve problems right now. Like, we want to solve problems. Here, I have something interesting, actually. Shifting gears, completely going just off on a tangent. Did you see what Netflix announced? I think it was yesterday.
No.
They're going to open up a Netflix like space where they're going to premiere like their shows and their movies.
Really? I mean, I feel like that's smart. They should have like a little theater and just do that and like get people talking and have people come out. That's a good idea.
Yeah, but they're going to have shops. They're going to have restaurants. It's like going to be a whole thing. It isn't just going to. Yeah, basically like a little Netflix shopping center.
Do you want to do that? Would you go?
I would 100% go. I'm one of those people that is like, what's the word for it when you're like an elitist about something? I believe movies need to be watched in the theater. Like, I don't think they need to be watched on your couch. I think that is just terrible.
Well, I would be a hypocrite if I agreed with you there, because I watch a lot of them, on my couch. And I found, actually, to be honest, that I grew up watching movies in a theater, and I have found the movie theater experience to be significantly lacking in recent years because it hasn't changed in 40 years, right down to the resolution that most movies are projected at is significantly smaller and lower than the resolution on the average home television. So most movies are delivered at 2K resolution and projected at 2K in the multiplex on a giant screen, whereas your average movie is watched and consumed in 4K on the screen, even though that movie is blown up to 4K because that's they were all finished in 2K. But this is the dirty little secret in the industry: is you're watching stuff in lower resolution in the movie theater than you are at home.
I mean, I get that from us. So, like, you wanted to go super nerdy on us today.
Yeah.
Like, I'm talking about like Snakes on the Plane in the theater, listening to people lose their mind when Samuel L. Jackson said, "It's time to get these mother effing snakes off this mother effing plane." And like the theater lost it, right? They just erupted, right? So I feel like there's this beautiful thing about hearing people gasp and scream and cheer and being in that environment when you're watching a movie and you're celebrating that with your peers.
I totally agree. I think there's a communal aspect to movies, but I also think in many ways that's been demolished by the blockbuster economy that has come out. So maybe if Netflix is going to introduce more niche based or return things to a more like interesting theatrical experience versus the lowest common denominator one that we've got at this point, I'd probably go. I would do it, but I think the model would need to change. And I think I want a heightened experience. I want live music. I want various things to start being incorporated. I want a show around all of this when I go out to the Netflix theater versus walking in, spending $25 for a single ticket and then $15 on popcorn and stale popcorn, by the way, because I used to work in a movie theater. And do you know, I'm going to break two things. All of the popcorn in most multiplexes is kept in the basement in bags that have been there for months. Two, the butter that gets placed in the popcorn vending machine is actually green. It warms up and it turns yellow. It's not actually real. Like, just know that that's what's going on there. When you put butter on your popcorn, you are putting butter on popcorn that was put into a popcorn machine so that it looks like it was freshly popped, but actually was in a basement for months. And then it is taken out, put it into a bag, and then you pour butter, right? Butter on that's actually green that turns orange when it's heated up. Just letting you know.
This is making me very sad. It's making me very sad.
We're not solving a problem. So we want to solve a problem. Here's how we solve movie theaters. For me, I'm going to solve movie theaters and return the experience. You level up the concessions. You get more interesting concessions versus the same stupid corporate candies that have been in there since I was a child. You level it up with more interesting choices. You include live music in the theater setting so that there's maybe a little bit of a show or human interaction, or you do it ArcLight style where you've got actual humans creating a more communal experience, and you make it more equitable for smaller niche related movies to actually build followings versus just the giant mega blockbusters dominating everything, and you turn it more into a interesting experience and equitable experience for people. That's how I change it. Plus, you level up, get rid of DCPs, and you get rid of theaters so that literally anybody can bring in an HDMI cable and screen out of any theater, and then you can make it really interesting.
I'm down for that. I mean, I like renting out movie theaters. We've done it a few times. It's been pretty cool. During the pandemic, we wanted to watch, what was it? It was Mortal Kombat. It was like right when the pandemic was ending. So a group of friends and I, we rented out the entire theater so we could watch that movie, and it was awesome.
Well, dude, how cool would it be if you could just literally go in the back there? They had a giant theater, and you
Mm.
could plug in an HDMI, right, and just play your QuickTimes back that were finished in 4K out of Final Cut, or your band wanted to just like play a show and like turn it into Rocky Horror, and then you could just go and run whatever you wanted in the background off the theater in the background, in the multiplex, and you could rent that out, turn it into a party, and do whatever you wanted.
Next time you're in LA, we should rent out a theater, film the podcast there, and then like screen a movie that we really want to watch.
That sounds awesome, and we should
Right? That'd
invite
be
everyone
fun.
out for free on it. The problem, though, is that you need a DCP in order to do it for the most part. You've got to load it into their stupid DCP players. So you can't actually do what I'm talking about in most of them.
We'll find one. We'll find one. We're gonna make this
Yeah,
happen. It sounds
find me
fun.
one with an HDMI port. This is another pet peeve of mine. Is like literally Apple has been releasing laptops for decades that where you can play out HDMI directly out of a laptop and play something at a significantly higher resolution and mastering codec, ProRes XQ, for instance, than you could ever play in a theater. So for some reason, because of their stupid security concerns, we have to lock down multiplexes across the country into 2K resolution and into extremely hard to encode and color manage files that are largely unplayable in most places and drive independent filmmakers completely insane.
Huh. You're gonna have to talk to me about that because I'm actually not familiar about what that is. What are you talking about? Like what and
Oh,
why?
do you not? Oh, really? You don't know about this?
I
Do
don't
you know
know
what a
about any
DCP
of
file
this.
is?
No, I've never even heard of it.
Are you serious? Oh, I just assumed because you're in the video side. So
Dude,
DCP.
wait, just so you know, we export our files, or when we were doing that here in the US, we were exporting them in ProRes LT, I think. Because like
Oh,
well, think about it, right? Like India doesn't have, for the most part, HD, right? It's still mainly SD, so the color profiles and stuff didn't matter. And so it was just like, why would we export it in this when it's just gonna get crunched down anyway?
okay. Well, I'm about to start talking in another language, Jace. So everybody listening on the podcast who doesn't understand color science or any of this other
I'm
stuff,
gonna lean back.
you're
Here we
going to get
go.
sad.
Okay.
But here's basically how this all works. When you watch something on TV, do you know what color space it's reproduced in?
It's not RGB.
No, it's Rec 709.
Okay, yeah, I
And
did know that. I did know that. Sorry.
so it's called Rec 709. That's the color space, and it's a very limited color space. And so now we're entering a world where you have to master for Rec 709 color spaces, which is the way most people consume your average monitor, most HD TVs. It's all Rec 709. Then you have the DCI color space, which is XYZ based, and it has a completely different gamma and expandable color profile. And so you have to master it in a completely different style of color that is different, by the way, than HDR color. So HDR color is in nits. And so you have HDR TVs in one color space, you have HD TVs in Rec 709, and then you have movies being mastered in DCI. And then you also, at a 2.6 gamma, Rec 709 is 2.2. I think HDR, I got to actually, I'm not even going to say it because I'm not totally certain. But it's a completely, so these are three different mastering ways, right? That you have to master your movie three different ways to play on these different devices. Plus, if it's NTSC, it's was it Rec 600? I forget what it is. It's been a minute since I've been in colors, but it's a completely different color space. So there's four color spaces. If it's SD, HD, for the theater, or for HDR. Filmmakers have to adapt their color correction for each of these. The percentage of filmmakers who even know what I'm talking about is close to zero right now in terms of
I'm one
how
of
this is
them.
done.
I've
And
never even heard of this.
and so uh, feel free to fact check me. But DCPs are the file type that is required to play in theaters. And the DCP then is then imported to the DCP server on most theatrical projectors that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is a lobby that, the theater lobby, right? This is all rigged. And this is to protect the sanctity of studio pictures. But the problem is these are all basically all the movie projectors and most of the multiplexes are 2K because when they moved to DCP right around the time that HD came out, 2K seemed like a good standard. And they've now not updated most of these theatrical projectors for 4K. And all of them run off a very specific and secure DCP type file that you have to encode. And there's an entire business, there's sub business in the film festival economy, which is adapting most Rec 709 color spaces HD TVs for playable DCPs that will actually play and not look insane in theaters. And this is how most film festivals run. And most film festivals have DCP transcoding services just so they can play in the movie theaters that they've rented. Where the way it should work is HDMI is 4K. Your laptop is HDMI on it. You should be able to export a ProRes and just play the damn thing out through a 4K projector and have it look awesome.
Wow. I mean, you just blew my mind. I mean, this in a weird way is a one-to-one to taxes. Like, it's just like, why are we paying these taxes? Why are we having to export into this obscure
it's absurd.
codec? Yeah.
If I just had a regular off-the-shelf or decent high-quality 4K projector that just had HDMI in, I would have a significantly higher quality screening than just about every multiplex in the US, like literally projecting on someone's backyard.
The more we speak, by the way, the more I realize like why you're bitter about certain things, right? Because like, you know, we talk about color space, you know, from time to time, not often, but when we do, like,
when you said who hurt me,
yeah,
just know a lot of people hurt me as I tried to get movies ready to play in various theaters and various places being an independent filmmaker. And I had to learn all this stuff.
This all makes sense now. It's just coming full circle all the time here.
Here we are.
Yeah. So, all right, we talked about taxes. We didn't solve that problem. We talked about Netflix, you know, interesting. And now we've talked about color space. What else you got in the last 19 minutes of this beautiful, best podcast ever, solving world problems?
I don't know that we've solved it. Well, actually, no, we did solve movie theaters, which is HDMI out of a Mac laptop in ProRes.
Actually, I have a question for you. I mean, we did a whole podcast series about, you know, what's going on with the writer's strike versus what's going on with the, IATSE. Do you have any updates on what's happening in that world? Are we safe? Are we not safe? Is the industry still in trouble? What's going on?
Oh, the industry is a dumpster fire. My wife is actually sitting over there looking at me. She doesn't. She just shook her head. She's like, I don't know. It's a third rail. But basically, we keep seeing posts from our friends all the time being like, I don't know what to do. I'm not working anymore. I think I need to leave LA. I'm on food stamps. I'm on this. And it's not looking like IATSE is going to strike, largely because they have no leverage because everybody's starving to death. But I did hear that production is not likely to return until next year, till all of this is sorted fully with the IATSE threat being handled. And then taking a few months for production really to truly gear up again in what's going to be likely a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles film production environment.
You're making me think that this is going to be the Book of Eli, just like, you know, just a desert wasteland type of. I should probably would have went with Mad Max. You know, that's more iconic. Is it going to be Mad Max here?
Los Angeles is a desert, and it is fundamentally unsustainable. It's absurd that there's a city as big as it is existing where it exists. And also, it's equally absurd that we ask creative artists to pay the amount of rent that they pay, being paid what they're paid in the supply and demand creative economy that exists in Los Angeles. So all of it is completely unsustainable for the average human being, right down to the completely escalating rents and home prices that somehow continue to go higher. I don't know who's paying for these things out there. So I do think the film production economy will continue, but I think the film production economy is far more suited to other parts of the country regionally, whether it's New Mexico, Atlanta, and other parts of. There's a ton of smaller movies being shot in Kentucky, believe it or not. And it's just simply because you can afford to pay artists and craftspeople a reasonable amount where they also still be able to pay their rent.
So also not good news is basically what you're saying.
For LA, no, I don't think it's good news.
Okay, so that's very specific. It's not good for LA. Do you see other markets where this is good?
Yes, everywhere else.
everywhere else. Is this intentional?
No, I think it's a highlight of LA, people in LA having an LA centric bias and just assuming that no matter what they do and no matter how much they exploit the people that work there, they're the only game in town and you have to be in LA to have a career. Whereas that is no longer true.
Okay. So I know you said everywhere else, but like be more specific. What markets are basically
I'm
popping
moving
up
to
at the moment?
Atlanta,
Yeah.
literally, for this exact reason. Because I think within the next 5 years, Atlanta is going to be the new Hollywood, in my opinion, in the US. And I think there's also other places around the world that are going to be hotbeds for content.
Can you like be more specific, right? Because like you've talked about it ad nauseum, but what specifically is drawing you to Atlanta? Because I know,
Housing
right, that
prices.
what the housing prices?
Yeah, you can afford a house in Atlanta. You can't in LA.
What about tax credits? I mean, because like you're a
Oh,
filmmaker at heart.
there's a great tax credit in Atlanta. There's also now infrastructure because so much production has happened. They built a lot of studios. There's a lot of actors out here. There's talent out here. There's tons of auditions, and it serves as a hub. And the Southeast in general, in my opinion, the Northeast of the country, infrastructure wise, has maxed out. The same in California. It's all old infrastructure. It's been there forever. It's not adapted for modern things. But if you come out to LA or if you come out to Atlanta, where I'm literally in Atlanta right now, and you drive around, all of the cities and malls and various suburbs feel new because they've been building them out. It's all new construction, and so it's more adapted for uh, where the world is going. Versus if you go up in the Northeast, that was built for the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and it's old infrastructure. Whereas the Southeast has not been developed, and we're watching it be developed in real time. So I think the Southeast is where the puck is moving in the U.S.
I will say this: I do find there to be a major advantage being in on the East Coast when it comes to trading stocks, as well as participating in the film industry, because you can basically have an incredible morning. You can have an incredible morning. You don't have to wake up that early, and by the time everybody's getting going on the West Coast, I mean, you're already in it, and it's awesome. I spent some serious time on the East Coast. I basically wanted to try it out, and I moved out there for about 2 or 3 months. I can't remember how long it was, and I remember thinking to myself, "Man, this is easy. It's easier to be more involved on the East Coast than it is on the West Coast."
Well, look, also in the world we live in, if you need to deal a lot with Europe on calls because everything is so connected, being on the East Coast for and matching up with European time zones is a huge win.
Mhm.
Versus being on the West Coast. And that's another big thing, too. So, if we're in a global world, being on the East Coast and having Zoom calls in the Zoom world that we live in, it's way easier to schedule calls because it's easy to schedule calls with the West Coast and it's easy to schedule calls with Europe.
Yeah. When I was in transition between moving from my last place to this current place, I also did a stint in Hawaii. I got an Airbnb in Hawaii for a month. I was like, I want to try this out too. And that was brutal, man. That was so brutal. That time shift destroyed me because I had, what I do. I have calls with Europe as well as I have calls with India, and I have calls with
Ah, it's
the East
impossible.
Coast all the time. Man, I was waking up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. like daily. But I will say this: once I got adjusted to it, it made Hawaii awesome because I was done with my day by essentially noon, and then I could like go surfing and stuff. It was fantastic, but a lot of discipline was involved.
But also, probably the most pleasant time you had working ever, I would think, right? Or you
Oh
get on the
man,
siesta schedule. You probably do the Spanish schedule where you like take a nap in the middle of the day and then you wake up and you might stay up later.
I'm about to say something that you will not believe. I do not nap, and I only sleep 4 to 4.5 hours a night.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that, man. I could not function. There's just no way. But I do. Unfortunately, I've got to run. This
Hey,
is we gotta we.
quick
But
one.
how do we feel? Did we solve any problems here, Jace? I don't know that we
We
did.
we didn't solve any problems, but dude, getting to speak with you is like the highlight of my week every week. So we're
Oh,
still
come on.
maintaining. And I want to just say, hey, like I'm proud of us because we are just shy. It's not this episode, but next month, or sorry, not next month, next week will mark the 4th month of the Elevate podcast.
Unreal.
We haven't missed a single week. That's incredible.
We are astonishingly consistent considering how busy we are. So I'm actually very proud of that. It's look, we're gonna keep, dude. I enjoy it, man. Bottom line. And if anybody out there is listening, let us know what you want to see us do, or if there's people you want to see us bring on in general. And thanks as always for being a part.
Yeah, take us out, Sam.
I'm going to go ahead and say this was the best episode ever. I don't know if that's true or not, but I feel like it's words that I can say, much like our politics. It doesn't matter if it's true. It just matters that you said it.
I love it. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this episode. We'll catch you here next week on the ELAV8 podcast. Peace.